Senator McKelvey, I gotta mute my thing. Hold on, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I have the webinar up in my lap because we do have more people on the webinar than in studio. And so I'm gonna be monitoring the chat so that we can keep it as inclusive for everyone to be able to speak. Let's see, I know that signed up there were 30 or so, but I don't know if I can actually see how many people are in it. But yes, we just want to make sure that we can keep everyone. So Eric will do a little more moderating here, and I'll keep my eyes on this. And then we are expecting Senator McKelvey. He did have his flight canceled this morning, so he said he would get here as soon as he can. We had heard that from him around 8:30, so not quite sure what we're like on timing for that. And then just in terms of the microphone, because if you've joined us for any of these sessions before, the team likes to make it a talk story as much as anything. So it's not, anyone talking at you. It's more just trying to have the community engage on the topic. And so we wanted to make sure in terms of microphone etiquette that if you're turning to talk to people, make sure you bring the microphone with you. Keep it about this level, a little like sharper than a 90 degree. And so just making sure that we're remembering that, how it can get at the community meetings. People hold the mic down here. And so just so that we can make sure that the people online can hear us as well. And then my ask for the folks on the webinar is to please use the chat as much as possible rather than the Q&A, because I'm just on this as a guest. I don't have any admin things, and so I can leave and go check the screen for Q&A and see what's back there and come back out. But just to keep it easiest for me, if you folks can, using the chat more than the Q&A. And so I think that covers all my housekeeping stuff. And so I'm going to hand it over to Eric, and we're going to just talk about the overview of the bill. We know some of the other sessions that we've done, people more had seen articles about the bill, or hadn't necessarily read it themselves, or they had read the first version of the bill, which is very different from the way that SD2 reads. And so just in terms of making sure that we're kind of all on the same page about what's actually in the bill. And then, so.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Senate Bill 3381 is the bill that we're here to talk about today. And just to give you a brief history, the bill was actually introduced primarily by West Maui State Senator Angus McKelvey, but it was actually authored by Senator Donovan De La Cruz, who's the Ways and Means Chair in the Senate. And this bill was inspired through a visit that Senator De La Cruz and the Ways and Means Committee, a visit that they had in Lahaina in about early January. And there were community members there, and the voice was that they wanted that the wishes of the community was for Lahaina to have almost direct say or have a very strong leadership position within the decision making of what happens in Lahaina, specifically regarding the rebuild. So the bill was authored specifically with that message in mind. Senate Bill 3381, while it is so I'm a former employee of the state Senate. It's what we would call it's a big bill. It's a massive bill because it prescribes so many powers, a variety of powers within this Lele Community Board. But I guess to sort of backtrack, what the bill establishes is the Lele Community District, and the authors of the bill did attach a map to the bill. So it would actually include everything from almost right after the Pali all the way up into the Mauka side of Ka'anapali, but it doesn't actually encompass the resort area or the hotel area of Ka'anapali.
This is the Lahaina Moku.
So this is pretty much what they define as the Lahaina Moku, or what would be within the boundaries or the jurisdiction of this Lele Community District. So in specific to this district would be an establishment of a Lele Community Board. When the bill was originally written, it would be a board that would be appointed by the governor, but through the different hearings and amendments that were made, they decided to make the board elected by residents who live in the district. And I know there's a lot of questions about that because for West Maui residents, we consider Lahaina to be all the way up to Kahakaloa even, right? Unfortunately, there was some legal issues, some constitutional issues from the Attorney General's office, who said, unfortunately, the voting and the voting bloc and the members of this board would have to actually reside within this district. So it does restrict membership or direct participation to people who actually live within the outliers of this map. The board would have sole jurisdiction over this district. So pretty much this bill attempts to establish a township for Lahaina. It would give specific authorities and powers to the board, a variety of authorities, including completing a community plan, deciding how to implement infrastructure, but there's also some other things, including the ability to establish rental limits within the district, as well as prescribe assessments to landowners, which would in turn help to pay for some of the expenses that the district would incur for infrastructure or facilities or whatnot. And then ultimately, the board would actually be placed under, and this is the reason for today's meeting, would be placed under the Hawaii Community Development Authority, or we like to call them HCDA. The state loves their acronyms. So under the Hawaii Community Development Authority, they would act as the administrators, I should say, of this district. So they would facilitate the meetings for this board, and then also administer any sort of decision making that the board does in regards to community planning, infrastructure, facilities, things like that. The current version of the bill, which is the SD2, the Senate Draft 2, which was passed out of the Ways and Means Committee, made some amendments in regards to, specifically to address some community concerns. One of those was to highlight that eminent domain authorities that would be given to this board would specifically be used just for public good or public infrastructure purposes. It wouldn't, we wanted to clarify that type of authority wouldn't be used to, and this was sort of Craig's words during our last community meeting, was we wouldn't steal Auntie's house to put up a apartment or condominium on her lot. That's not the intent of the eminent domain provisions within this bill, and I think the Ways and Means Committee wanted to make sure that that was clear and added within the committee report to highlight their legislative intent. Including to that, there is a limitation on the amount a candidate for the board could accept, and I think it's limited to $100. So this was to sort of safeguard from any sort of vote buying or any sort of big money type of political campaigns that could possibly come in and skew a community representation within the board. So the legislative intent there is to specifically keep it very community-based with residents who are making the decision-making. Let me sort of backtrack. It also provisions that this board can utilize advisory boards as well. So, and these advisory boards could consist of residents who don't live in the district but perhaps still make up the West Maui community. So if they live in Kahana or Honokowai or in Apili, there would still be an opportunity for them to voice their have a voice within this district. And then I think some other amendments they made was really sort of to clarify some of the election protocols. And so with the election would be held at the end of January, the way the bill is written now, at the end of January of next year, 2025, and that was specifically because the Office of Elections had concerns about trying to do the elections for this year's November elections, because this would actually create a lot of work for them as well, because they would have to create a ballot. They would have to identify who the voters are and go through the process of communicating that with them. So the earliest that they could do it is January 2025, and then I think the way that the bill is written is upon election certification, that's when the term of that board starts. So they immediately come into the authority of the Lele Community Board. And that's the overview of SB3381. So if you're seeing SB3381 without any Senate draft attached to it, you want to definitely make sure that you're looking at Senate Draft 2 or SD2 to see the most current version. So currently with this bill, the bill is, I forgot to add, the Lele Community Board is a 9-member board. So the bill did pass the Senate, and it's currently in the House. Upon crossover, it has a referral of a joint committee as its first referral to the House Committee on Waterland and Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. So that's the first referral, and then it would have a referral to the Finance Committee. And the reason being for that is because there is appropriations within the bill. So there is a $100 million appropriation to the Lele District to fund whatever projects, and then it allows them to also take up to, I think, another $100 million of private donations if so it should be collected. There's also some appropriations for HCDA to do some of their operational expenses such as hiring staff and kind of starting or letting them sort of start the administrative work. There's a $6 million appropriation for community engagement. So that would be the board and HCDA's efforts to make sure that there's community discussions or involvement within any process and planning that they do, and as well as appropriations to the Office of Elections in order to hold that special election in January of next year if this bill shall be enacted. So as you can see, like I said, it's a very large bill, it's a big bill. It prescribes a lot of authority, but at the same time, it was intended to really put out a legal vehicle, a legal vehicle that would pretty much grant this sort of wish of a direct community direction for Lahaina. And I know everybody has, a lot of people have different opinions on that, and certainly that's the purpose of why we're holding these meetings, and this is in no way Jackie or I or anybody in our sort of working groups attempts to persuade you or convince you that you should support the bill or to oppose the bill. These meetings are specifically to have educational sessions, informational sessions, because one of the things that we have learned in our discussions with HCDA and even with the legislature is that this is an unprecedented bill. At no time has there ever been an attempt to establish a township that, that pretty much is kind of almost independent or supersedes the current governmental structures. So to clarify, yes, the board would have authorities that would supersede some of the authorities that are afforded to the county and even to the state, because they would have specific jurisdiction over what happens within the district. So with that being said, I think last month we had community meetings held at Napili Noho under a very small tent, but it felt very community. We told Craig and his staff that this is how Lahaina has been operating for the past since the fires. If there has to be a meeting and it's a community meeting, it's going to happen in a tent at one of our neighborhood hubs. And so that's sort of where we had about 30 participants who came out the last time. And it was just an opportunity to ask questions to HCDA, have them really clarify what this proposal would look like upon implementation. And sort of one of the things that Craig and I talked about before we even had that community meeting was they fully understand that there's a lot of buy-in into this community. There's that they have to earn the trust of the community in order to even have these discussions. And so we thank all of you for being here personally, and for those of you who are joining us online, because this is specifically what we wanted to achieve in having this type of meeting, is just to have a roundtable discussion. And all of us here in the front, we know that this might not be the final product, but we're certainly giving time to it and giving attention to it, because we feel that the most important part is that there can be opportunity for education and an opportunity to talk about a community plan and what that looks like for Lahaina. If it be so through Senate Bill 3381, okay. If it be through other sort of avenues, then certainly we want to be able to have those discussions. All right, well, does anybody have any questions on the bill?
I'm gonna just come around to you guys.
Aloha. My first question is about how this whole system is initiated. It's an empowerment to our governor. It's an empowerment to the state. And it's taking away the power from the county itself and from the residents. So your statement of having this bill be one to get more community involvement, when I look at the structure, the base of it all, it contradicts that. This is about the governor and the state having more power. If this was for the community, it would be based on getting the community engaged, involved, not 30 people, as you mentioned, but the entire community to really look at, because this has such a huge impact on the future, where you're empowering this group. And again, it comes from the state. This has to come from the county. This is our community. So that's my first comment.
So I just want to clarify that community meeting that we had back in February at Napili Noho, it was open to the public. It wasn't by invitation. We had advertised it. We had tried to promote it. We didn't know how many people to expect. And there was two sessions, and we tried to make it we tried to accommodate people's schedules. We understand it was a Friday, but we had one session in the morning that lasted for over 2 hours. We had one session in the afternoon. And that's the thing I understand what you're saying, and in no way is this a defense, but we're not acting as agents of HCDA or the state. We're Lahaina residents. We don't even operate under an umbrella of an organization. We're just interested community members who have an interest in legislation who wanted to have that conversation. So I completely understand what you're saying. The opportunity to have a bigger community meeting is
We don't have a platform.
we don't have a platform. Yeah.
We're just community members.
And that's the difficult thing, is that's the question that I think a lot of people in the community of Lahaina is trying to ask is, okay, everybody wants community meetings, but who's going to hold these community meetings in a way that's equitable to the residents? So there's county meetings that are being held, but it's the county reporting what they're doing for Lahaina. And of course they take question and answers, but it's not in the way that we're trying to design this, in which we're trying to make it as equitable for everyone to have a fair opportunity to express their opinions or questions. So I agree with you. I think just the thing is we have to there has to be some type of initiative by an organization or a group of community members who can find space, number one. And if that's the county, then that's something I would say to them. You know, why hasn't the county had more sort of roundtable discussions where they're allowing community members to express their voice? Where?
No, but that's That's more just them updating us, right? When county has these meetings at the Civic Center, they're giving us, like, these are the updates and the breakdowns, and people now can ask their questions about certain things, and sometimes they can get their answers, right? But they're not including us in any sort of planning, and that's more what we meant was, you know, how can we... The Oluwalu Good...
That is central,
Well-
that the community wanted to see, not at Uluwatu. So there was a lot of community input, and then the response was to use this as the central site, as a permanent site. So there is interaction, and it could be organized a lot better, especially with the intention of that. But to have it come from the state, from the governor, and empower them, that is taking it away from our community.
So let me just comment on that, sir. And thank you for inviting us all. You know, we appreciate the opportunity to answer questions. And let me just kind of put this in a little bit of context. Number one, this bill or the idea for it did not come from the governor. Did not come from the governor. It did not come from the county. It originated from Senator De La Cruz's and Senator McKelvey's and Ways and Means visit to Lahaina to speak with somebody. So again, I want to be very clear that this idea is not the governor's, it is not the county's, it is an idea. And when you look at it in that context, it's an idea that gets submitted to the legislature in the form of a bill, and it's open for discussion. It's just an idea, right? And if the idea doesn't get finalized this session, and there needs to be more discussion among the community, I think so be it. That's what happens. If the idea takes hold this session and it passes, it still has to get signed by the governor, and there's no guarantees that the governor will sign it. I can't speak for the governor. So it's just an idea.
Now, Craig, would you mind elaborating? Because for me, part of the question speaks to some of the misunderstanding about the bill in terms of the structure of who's in control, right? Because a lot of people see it as this is state power, right? But to me, I read it as this is the first thing I've seen to actually a proposal that is proposing let Lahaina lead, because this elected board is Lahaina residents, right? So how is that giving the state power versus, so could you just speak to that for me?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. You know, the way this bill has been drafted and the idea from it is really local governance and sort of democracy at its best, in the sense that there is not a governor-appointed board. That idea was sort of, you know, was tossed out. It's an elected board made up of 9 members of this residents of this district who are going to lead this effort, right, with support from the Hawaii Community Development Authority staff and resources of the staff. It is a board that is going to really shape the community plan and the vision after taking into account a lot of community engagement. So it is really a unique opportunity. I mean, all of my boards, or the HCDA boards, the other boards, are half made up of government people, what's called ex officio people, who are, of course, appointed by the governor, and then there's community members. This board is 9 members who are elected by residents of the district. Now, it does have powers, and those powers are part of what HCD has and what the powers that this board has. but those powers are going to be exercised and determined by this Lele District Board, the 9-member board, with guidance, with the knowledge that the staff has, myself, and the other people that we hire for it to staff this. Jackie, does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. So this is Jackie. One of the comments that we received is, basically it's just the two of you on the screen. So people online are wondering if we can identify ourselves before we speak. So especially because they all have their full names online. So Jackie Keefe speaking here. I'm the one walking around with the mic for questions. And I just, so that is one of the comments. And then in terms of questions, so will this be a special election in January 2025, which, yes, and it would be its own election, correct?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, so,
What do you mean by, what do you mean by restricted voting?
Meaning that they're registered. So we have, there's interest and there are connections to Lahaina. So people have obviously had to move away for various reasons throughout 10, 20 years. So you're saying they're registered voters, only Lahaina, but how does that eliminate or disregard people's rooted historical connection and their voice if they're not registered voters for a specific Lahaina district?
Okay, I'm going to kind of repeat the question so that I kind of understand. The question essentially asks, since a lot of Lahaina residents don't live in Lahaina anymore, live in other parts, can they still vote or can they still run for office? And the answer is yes. There's a residency requirement, right? The residency requirement is contained in Hawaii law, chapter 11-13, and it's a residency requirement, much like, and the grounding principle in the residency requirement is, do you have sort of a intent to return? So and that's very subjectively applied. So an analogy of that is, if you're a college student, you live in Lahaina, and you go to the mainland for college, you still can vote, in the state because your intent probably is always, to return. Or if you just are out of the state for a little bit and then you have an election, you can still vote. It's residency, and it's whether you intend to return or not.
So how are you going to facilitate landowners that are short-term rentals who have, I guess, money in the game but don't live here?
I'm not sure. So people who reside in the district are able to vote and to run for office. Do you mean whether landowners who own land but don't live in the district? I think you have to reside in the district. So if you're a landowner but your permanent residence or your residence is Kahului, for example, but you have a business in Lahaina, I don't think you can register to vote. But all of these questions, I'm not an elections expert. I had to kind of learn some of these recently. These are all going to be administered, the elections, by the county clerk's office, the county clerk, meaning the Maui County Clerk. If there is a dispute or a challenge as to someone's so-called residency, the Maui County Clerk will look at the challenges and make a decision whether the challenge is valid or not. But this question about residency has come up before. So again, if someone has moved out of the district because they're a renter, they lost their place to live, they can still, vote and register to vote in the district. I think they can still run for office.
I think one of the clarifications that the Office of Elections did have during the hearings was trying to utilize a resident's voter registration prior to the fire. So if you were registered to vote within the district, during the last election, then you would have almost sort of this automatic eligibility to vote in this election.
So me being born and raised in Lahaina, I'm registered for Kakalua. Like, that's my home residence. I lost my business in the fire. And so Wailuku is where I'm registered to vote. But I have strong ties to Lahaina. So I got confusing information that yes, we could vote. Now we're being said no because we're not in the district.
You would have to have a resident address in Lahaina in order to vote. So you would have to actually be living in Lahaina. So unfortunately, if you are not, and it's within the parameters of that map, right? So for example, and this was one of the things as community members we've sort of went back and asked for is there a way to safeguard like for me, like I technically I live in the district now, but I grew up in Honokawai. I'm from Honokawai. So if my address was still Honokawai, I wouldn't be able to vote because I live outside of the district. But then the catch-all to that is I wasn't registered to vote at my current residence during the last election. So my voter registration is still a Honokawai address. So that would almost make me ineligible to vote for this election as well. So there's a lot of intricacies there. And I think the Attorney General during the hearings, they tried to clarify what the sort of legal parameters are. And then the Office of Elections is trying to take those legal parameters and actually implement something that is very clear cut and try to make sure that there's a lot of transparency, because that was the intention of the bill, is to create this sort of transparency.
Yeah. And one more comment before we move to other questions. HCDA will not be running or administering the elections. That is a county function, Office of Elections function. Once the results of the election are certified, those are the board members that will be on the 9-member board. We will not have any part in the elections, the nomination papers, qualifications, anything. That is up to the county clerk.
Yes.
Representative Lele Community is trying to get in, and she's not finding a link anywhere on a company website.
I'll text it to her right now.
So,
Hold on one second, just because but also I wanted to say, I love this engagement. And for me, I know that everyone is very busy, and, especially like Lahaina-based people generally used to working multiple jobs. And, for me personally, this is the first time I've been able to engage because I was a restaurant manager. I didn't have time for this.
Why she hasn't been notified or engaged in this as our state representative?
Okay. So I did not text her personally about it. So Ellie Cochran is wondering why she hasn't been notified about this. I think a lot of people found out about it the same way, which is just kind of via media, because we were only able to get the link up 2 days ago. So I'm trying to pull it up now so that I can text, but I'm talking and I'm doing this at the same time. But I was starting to say that, in terms of these kind of conversations, these are also the exact perfect things for testimony, right? Like these kind of comments, like you don't even have to support or oppose something. You can comment, right? So these are all great comments. And so I'm sorry, this is very, yes, please.
Okay, my name is Keefe. I got 2 questions here. One, has anybody discussed this with the mayor? I mean, I know you're saying that the county hasn't had roundtable discussions, but the mayor's actively holding 20 to 30 person meetings like once a week that I know several of us have been a part of that have been very informative. And I don't know that he's developed a plan yet, but I think that he should be included in this conversation.
Yeah, we did invite several people from the mayor's office. They did send a list of their own questions. We asked that they come. We want them to be engaged in this. We've let them know. You know, they say if this bill goes through, because I know they don't support it, and they say if this bill goes through, there's going to be it's going to stop things that we've been doing. We're going to have to just put a halt on it, right? So I was like, great. What are those things? Please share those with the community.
Okay, so my second question is, who has the power here? But does this 9-member board, or does HCDA? Because I've been on Harbor Committee board, you know, Harbor, I've been assigned for the state, and we're on a board for the harbor, and we have all these meetings, and we recognize problems, and we come up with solutions, and no one from the harbor or the state even acknowledges that we have this meeting, and they're the ones mandating that we have this meeting, and they wouldn't even acknowledge that we existed ever. And that went on for years. So I'm concerned that this committee comes together and does their thing, and then HCDA just does whatever they're going to do anyway.
So, Craig Nakamoto, Executive Director of Hawaii Community Development Authority. So the 9-member board does have the power to administer the district. They are the ones that are going to make decisions. As I mentioned before, the HCDA staff, including myself, Garrett, Ryan, and the other staff members that we hire, will provide resources and advice and recommendations to the 9-member board. This board is separate, as mentioned. This board is separate from the other HCDA boards. Does that answer your question? Okay. Sorry, I catch you. I mean, well, you're the moderators.
No, you're fine.
Hi, I'm Jerry Isdale, and my question is, how does the Lele Development District work or see working with the County Office of Recovery? In particular, I mean, there's all sorts of issues, like if you're running the planning, how do you work with Maui County Planning? How do you get the permitting from the fire department? Beyond that, or closer than that, the county has been setting up their resource, the RSFs, the long-term recovery plans under the Office of Recovery. A key piece in that, which we're hearing from people, is the community engagement aspect, which has been stumbling along. There's a outside agency consulting group which is being hired to help that. That is stuck in contract renegotiations as the contract changed. How do you see you guys working, or the Lele Development District, in terms of planning and getting the community engagement? The county is stuck 6, 8 months, 12 months late in getting anything out, or in being able to engage the public.
I'm going to answer this in a couple of ways. So, you know, big picture, we were asked to help in this through the bill. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I just lost all the chat.
Oh, okay.
Ellie, the
Okay.
link.
Okay. So we were asked to help in this bill. So we're here to help, you know, and do what we can. I think the county, as well as the state, as well as HCDA, have the same goal, and I think it's to, you know, rebuild Lahaina. I believe we all have the same goal. The county is doing work now, and I know that they're trying to engage with a community planner. I believe that we can work together. Now, the county is not part of this bill right now. They are not part of this bill. It is, like I said, a 9-member. There's no ex officio members on the board. No, mayor's representative. But there is opportunity for the county to be involved. There is advisory groups that the board can create. So I would imagine, I'm kind of envisioning that the county would be part of that advisory group, and there would be others that would be part of that advisory group if the bill passes and the governor signs it. And I think there's certain things that if the county is working right now to rebuild a sewer line or rebuild, some other area, I think the county should proceed with those things. Now, there could be situations where and I can let Ryan and Garrett elaborate too, but there could be situations where the county comes in to repair a sewer line. And after some community engagement and community planning, maybe there's a need to increase the capacity of that sewer line. So there's a possibility that we would have to come in and increase the capacity of that pipe. So there is, all that possibility. But I think there's ways that we can work together. The community engagement part, that's a big part of this bill, is to do community planning to come up with a plan. And the development guidance policies in the bill kind of guide us to work with the counties and work with the county plans. And then to take into account past studies that were done, like the West Maui Community Plan, which is part of good planning, is taking into account all that.
So I just have a question. I'm curious where your funding is coming from to be here today.
This is coming from HCDA.
Just our regular operating expenses from our central office.
But why are you even involved? Why is...
She's asking why are they even involved?
So, as I explained earlier, we're invited here because we are part of the bill, right? HCDA is in the bill.
We as community members were the ones who invited them to have the conversation with us because we wanted the conversation to happen and it wasn't happening in any other way. So they were kind enough to... Yes, myself, Eric here, Yayoi, Hara, Sneh Patel, Tanada, I always say her last name wrong, Lelesio, and Uncle Earl Kukaha. Oh my God. Kukahiko, thank you. Because we saw the need for a discussion around the bill, and we, as community members, just want people to be able to have the chance to speak.
Can I? Yeah. My name is Theo Morrison, and I'm speaking as an individual. People don't know about this huge bill that's going to have a huge impact on us. So the community group, it's a failure in public information getting out there. It's absolutely, people don't know about it. And then you're having an election in 9 months. That's crazy. We need at least a year. There's possibilities. There's some potential here, but we would never support this if the way it's being just shoved down our throat. That's how we feel. Yeah, we got lots and lots of questions, and there's lots and lots of people who don't have a clue about this bill. So it really needs to be at least a whole nother year, lots of meetings. There should be 3,000 people at this meeting, not just 30, or there's not even 30 here. So I'm appalled. I do a lot of community stuff, a lot, and I would be very ashamed of myself if this is all I got for a bill as big as this.
So I agree, because it was Theo who I learned about this bill, and then when I brought it home to my husband, who was a contractor, he didn't believe me. He thought it was made up. So stemming from the idea that that's how shocking that we've all been. So, but I'm also confused, and I mean, again, there's some good, there's some bad, but what is problematic mainly is if you were to do an organization structure, where this board sits within an organizational structure, it feels like you're bypassing Maui County. And while you're saying that the governor is not part of it, where in all of this people of authority does this board sit? Because it doesn't sit anywhere. It's like sideways. It's like Maui County's to the left, and this board does not sit in unilateral. Does that make sense? It's completely off on the side. And it's problematic because when you keep saying we're willing to work with Maui County, and then we hear there's Maui County's doing this, it instantaneously creates conflict within Maui County residents, and then you have the state saying, well, we're willing to help, open discussions, but it's as if there's a huge wall and the communication is not being, there's a connection dysfunction. And that's what I find very confusing.
I think you said it quite correctly. It's not a vertical connection. It's an attempt to create a township, which would create this, which would give this board the authority to sort of act as its own governance, and that's sort of what the.
But who is their authority? Because that's what, I mean, it has to sit somewhere.
Well, it would sit almost at the state level because it's being created within Hawaii revised statute. So it's not under a county ordinance. It would actually sort of become its own branch almost, if you would.
But there's still somebody above that's feeding the funding and
right.
ultimately giving the yays, nays, and you can't do that. Can I ask a question?
Ultimately, yeah. So there's a lot of hands.
Tara Paleka. I actually am trying to, not devil's advocate, I'm not for it, against it. I don't know, that's why I'm here, getting more information. But I'm wondering if the reason why this bill was brought up is possibly because, this is me just thinking outside the box, that possibly it's a way to just speed up the process, even though we want to make sure we do it right. There's nothing we should be speeding up necessarily, but at the same time, people have lost their homes. They want to get that regoing. I lost my business over there. I want to get that regoing. And we know the bureaucracy that we deal with in general. So maybe that was brought up to speed things up. It's just we're all freaking out because we don't feel that it's being brought to our community, you know, and being told, like Theo said. A lot of people don't know anything about this.
Sure. I want to give them the opportunity to go over this infographic, but I also want to make a comment about that. This is a bill within the legislature, and so this bill could easily have been having hearings without anybody's notice, right? The only reason why we came to sort of knowledge of this bill was because as a former legislative staff, I read through all the bills and I went and identified which ones would have Lahaina impacts. And so when this bill was sort of brought to my attention, I shared it with community members who I knew were interested within the legislative process, and it was like, okay, obviously we understood that this bill was going to have a lot of reaction, good or bad. Obviously, a lot of questions as well. So our attempts was in regards to this. And again, we're doing this through ourselves, right? No one's paying us to be here. No one, Akaku is just using their community network in order for us to host this. I mean, our first meetings were held at Napili Noho under like a 8x8 tent with folding chairs, and so there's no, if you're wondering, like who is organizing these things. This is literally community members to a state agency asking them to engage within this discussion. Because again, we don't know what this would look like, even for ourselves who've been reading this bill and been following it. And we probably have the same questions as you folks, is trying to, because, I mean, as a community member, a part of me also is, and again, I'm not like a fully support of this bill. I mean, but the thing is, I want to make sure that there's assurances there too. Like I'm a Lahaina resident. I grew up in Lahaina all my life. I went to West Side schools all the way from elementary to high school, and the thing is I want to make sure that for me, if you're asking me, I want to make sure that the voices get heard. And I completely understand what you're saying, but it's like the legislature, within their authority, within their ability, they're going to entertain ideas within their legislative session, whether or not there's community input or not. And so this is, unfortunately, I mean, I apologize that this is not the greatest forum that we could possibly have. If we could fill up the Civic Center and have this discussion as a community, that would be great. And
Angus could request that. I mean, he used to do town meetings all the time, so why couldn't he do that?
we don't know. We've asked. And we'll be totally transparent with you. We've asked to use the Civic Center. We've asked to hold these spaces. And we've been given runaround. So Napili Noho was the best we could do the first go around. And this is much better because at least we're under a roof and we're able to record it here. But this is sort of a community effort here.
Yes, so we do have a lot of questions that we're trying to get to. I have a huge list, and I don't want to lose it again because I got booted
Okay,
off.
I'm going to go ahead and take her question first before we start.
Okay, these are
Well, you-
Aloha, Allie Grimes. We lost our home and business in Lahaina. I think one of the main issues here, and particularly I can speak a little bit, and Keahi did, why this affects us personally, is the transfer of ownership of the land to the state is a very, very, very big deal with lifelong implications. And for us personally, as business owners in Lahaina Harbor, whose landlord has been the state of Hawaii for 20 years, I'm not sure how much you guys know about Lahaina Harbor or the harbors in the state of Hawaii in general, but the harbor has had several condemned slips. Owners have had to rebuild the front row that has been pushed back and pushed back. Our vessel, along with Atlantis Submarine, was grounded because they don't maintain the channel, damaging, potentially creating a huge amount of damage to us. So we're looking at this. Number one, we have a County of Maui firefighter. We've done our due diligence. We're reading our text from the county. We're meeting with the mayor. We see that the mayor heard us and said we do not want the final site to be in Oluwalu. The input was taken. It's slow, it's cumbersome, but it's actually happening. And so to take this precious land, and speaking as someone who was recreational and commercial out of Lahaina Harbor, the amount of money we bring into the state is massive. And so for us to think of the state technically owning all of West Maui, as residents, that's frightening. And not only that, this 9-person board, which is very utopian, and in a perfect world, if it could work with all the best and brightest civil engineers and Hawaiians and educators coming together, that would be great. But I don't think that's realistic at all. I don't think that's what would happen. And I would like to comment, why can the County of Maui maintain control of the land and you guys come in as consultants? Has that been proposed? Because the real knee-jerk reaction is we do not want the state owning West Maui. Many of us. I'm speaking for us, Theo, et cetera.
Ali, thanks for your questions and your comments. First of all, I'm sorry about your loss. So let me just make sure I clear up one thing in this bill. This bill does not transfer the ownership of any lands to HCDA or the board. Does not. It does not. What this does is create a district, which is the essentially is the Moku of Lahaina, and give that district boundaries and that district to the Lele District Board to plan for the rebuilding, to plan. There is nothing in this bill that transfers your land, anybody's land, to HCDA or the board. Nothing in this bill, okay? Now, as far as what the county is doing, I can't comment on what the county is doing or not doing, but this bill does not make that kind of transfer. There's nothing in this bill. In fact, it says just the opposite. And that was something that was specifically addressed. I want to sort of talk about another comment that was, I think, made sort of about the county. I think, you know, if people decide, I'm sorry, this bill, again, is one idea, as I mentioned, it's one idea to address the district and the rebuilding. It is one idea. If it doesn't pass in this session and it doesn't move along any further, okay, that's okay. I like to hear my voice. If it doesn't move any further, then it's an idea that now all of you are made aware that this idea was introduced, and you're that much more aware next session if a similar idea is introduced. And also, it gives you the opportunity to also to have maybe wider community discussion on this, or not. And the alternative is if this bill doesn't pass, or the governor doesn't sign it into law, then the county, I guess by default, will be the government entity that is in charge of rebuilding Lahaina. And you know, if that is the sentiment, ma'am, then I think everybody should respect that, including the legislature. And if people feel like they want the county to do it, I think that's the people's will. You know, if this bill passes, it's a challenging enough task. You know, if the bill was passed and we're in it, but it's harder if people really don't want HCDA in it, and it's going to make the job even more challenging. It's hard to do something when you know that you're not really wanted there, and you're not. People don't accept it. And if, again, I'm going to be very clear about this. It's an idea. It's an idea that has been brought to, albeit a few people, right? Not the whole community. And if the idea doesn't resonate with people, then it doesn't resonate with people, and it fails. And it may or may not come up in the next session. And if it doesn't, then by default the county will do it, and that's the will of you and everybody else who feels the county should be doing it, quite honestly. And I'm just going to say that. And if that's the will, I would almost prefer that HCDA not be involved, because that's the will of the people.
Yeah, and so I have a lot of questions that we've gotten from the past hour that I haven't gotten to, so I just want to kind of address some of those, and also point out that we asked these guys to make an entire presentation about the structure of HCDA and everything so that you could learn, because there's definitely a like HCDA equals Kaka'ako mentality, which isn't true. They have how many other districts? Like 7? 4 other districts in addition, and they're all very different. And so, you know, as they've said, this is a very different structure of a board. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. But in terms of questions, so the first question that we got that we didn't get to was, where do we, as the landowners on Front Street, get our voices heard here? I mean, I feel like on the chat, I don't.
So if this bill goes through, right, and the again, Ryan Tam, Director of Planning for HCDA, Planning and Development. So the board, as this bill is structured, right, the board has the authority to do planning, to come up with a community plan and coordinate essentially all the federal money, coordinate all to do the planning for the reconstruction of Lahaina. So I think if that happens, then the board would be empowered to reach out again, as Craig has said. The board could set up committees, right? So there would be a lot of input, presumably, from landowners like those on Front Street.
Yes, and it is written in the bill that there's, community planning, including but not limited to the West Maui Community Plan and, in terms of getting people involved.
And let me just add to what Ryan said. I think I mentioned whether you're the governor, I don't want to put words in the governor's mouth or the mayor's mouth or anybody else, but I think whether you're the governor, the mayor, Maui County Council, us, I think we all share a common goal that we want to see Lahaina be rebuilt. We may, all those entities I mentioned may have sort of competing, ideas about how that's going to get done. I think the other commonality that everybody shares is that the rebuilding of needs to have the input of people outside Lahaina, the district. It needs to have input from people who live and work in the district, people who have businesses on Front Street, people who own a charter business or boat business in the harbor. It needs to have philanthropy that is outside the district. I really don't think that the district, Lahaina, can be rebuilt without other people who don't live in the district, who live outside the district, live in Kahului, Wailuku, philanthropy and businesses. And yes, the bill doesn't have sort of a place like some of our other community development district boards have a business owner from Kakako, for example, or a business owner from Kalailoa or Heia. So it does not have that. But I think that was intentional by design and because of the local governance structure. And that may be a failing in the bill too, but I think by having the mechanism to bring in businesses, to bring in counties through the advisory group, I think you're going to have that necessary or that input.
So another question was, I would be interested in the clarification of community, lineal and cultural descendants, working class, longtime Ohana, settlers. Also, does compliance with federal contracts include condemnation? How does that affect kingdom era titles, et cetera?
Yeah, I guess I would say, again, I think the community, that would be up, the board would be, one of the key, yeah, they would help, they would basically help to determine kind of the path forward in terms of how the outreach occurs and who gets involved. I think there are guidance policies pretty clear that are in the current draft of the bill, which explains kind of the intent.
And I think we just didn't get to that in the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And then why is the land area so much larger than the burn zone? So why the whole Lahaina Moku?
I don't actually know the exact answer to that. I think the authors of the bill, they were just sort of trying to draw the line of what the Lahaina Moku is, and that's what they defined it as is sort of those lines that were drawn on the map. So that's a question I think, I think maybe Senator McKelvey or members of the legislature who authored this bill can better clarify. But I think there is a reason in regards to planning, right?
Yeah. And then Ryan can, Craig Nakamoto, Executive Director. So I think that's the primary reason. It was based on input. They wanted the MOCO of Lahaina included as a district. From a planning perspective, the district could have been 5 blocks long and 2 blocks wide, and you could have did that. But I think from a planning perspective, and especially if you're going to look at how the Lele District Board will, develop a community plan, having additional land area within the district allows for a little bit more flexibility in planning. If we had the district only 5 blocks long and 2 blocks wide, as an example, and that was the burn area, I don't know if we'd have the planning flexibility to really plan for it. So it's better to have all that other land in our jurisdiction. It's not to say, and I just want to make this clear because somebody's going to ask me, it's not to say that all of that land is going to get developed, but it's good to have that flexibility of having that additional land area.
Yeah, and I think when you look at a lot of the planning issues in West Maui, right? You have sea level rise, you have a lot of the highway access issues. So you have to kind of look at everything from a sustainability lens. Transportation and land use, they go together. The resorts, providing access to that, it's all kind of needs to be looked at. I think if just to step back for a minute, I think we can go through some of our slides in terms of what HCDA, the experience is. But I did want to say, for example, in Kaka'ako, where HCDA, again, we have about 300 acres right in the middle of downtown Honolulu. Again, the HCDA was founded in 1976 because the legislature found the legislature found that there was a unique opportunity, right? And Kaka'ako was a neighborhood at the time. It was industrial. It was considered to be blighted. Depends on who you talk to. And so they wanted to bring in special state resources. And so how we work in Kaka'ako, the board was formed. The board and the agency work and develop kind of the master plan and vision for the community, and then we develop the implementing zoning rules, right? So the form of how you can, what can get built. But then actually, in terms of building permits and all that, we work closely with the county, and so there's a very close kind of relationship with that.
And I'll get to the question, but since we're on the HCDA, so there's, in all of this, and I don't like to sort of, regardless of what you think about the concept of the bill, there's been a lot of discussion about why HCDA, or HCDA is Kaka'ako, or HCDA is Oahu, and frankly, I think it might take away from the merits of the bill So what I wanted to do was just kind of explain to you what HCDA is really like, and try to explain that the perceptions of HCDA are really what people might readily see when they think about HCDA. So let me see if I can just provide a little bit of information, because I think you'll find that maybe that what we are today is a little bit different. So I've been at HCDA for about 2 years now. Previously, I was with HCDA in the 2008, 2009. I was the community outreach officer. I came back to HCDA because, frankly, I wanted to do something good for the community and further build communities. So, as Ryan mentioned, we have a few districts on Oahu. The stadium is one of our districts. Kalailoi is one of our districts. That was the district that was given to us when the Base Realignment and Closure Commission closed Barbers Point. So we were given that district. Kakako is, of course, the district. But let me tell you about Heia, what I call the Heia story. And I want to, again, provide some context and a different perspective. Heia is about a 400-acre district on the windward side of Oahu, across Kamehameha Highway from the fish pond, the Heia, Pai o Heia fish pond. Okay, that parcel of land was at one point slated for an extensive residential development in an area where there was fertile and good sort of land for agriculture and other things. So there was a lot of community pressure. So we were asked to take that district as a community development district. We had to give up some of our land in Kakako and give it to the landowner in exchange to get Heia to prevent extensive residential development. And right now, it's under the stewardship of a nonprofit, Kako EV, led by Kaneko Schultz, and they have restored the loi, and they built a poi mill and a kind of a sustainable resiliency. They're trying to build a resiliency hub in that area. So we're not just all about development. Also on Oahu, you may be familiar with the Women's Correctional Community Center in Kailua. They are expanding their kitchen facilities. So they asked us to help build and manage the construction of that, because the expansion of that new kitchen facility will create more meals for the expanded beds, the new beds that they are creating, a new housing module. It will also allow for more usage of the kitchen by KCC, the culinary program that teaches inmates life skills, work skills, and cooking skills for when they are released. And they're hoping that that program will prevent a high recidivism rate. On the island of Hawaii, we were asked by DLNR to help them with a study of the Waiakea Peninsula area. That's Banyan Drive. So we helped them with a project that studied the feasible market study and feasibility uses for that district. So we are more than that. And then I want to just get back to Kakaako. So if you believe everything that's written in the newspaper or in Civil Beat, they describe Kakaako as a posh seaside village or area, okay? And it does have its share. It does have high-rise residential towers, and it is a live, work, play neighborhood. But let me also tell you what Kakaako has, because you may not know, but it has, in the Makai area, it has the Japsum School of Medicine. It has the Cancer Research Center, which is doing remarkable things in cancer research. It has the Entrepreneur Sandbox, which serves as an innovation and technology place for startups. In the other part of the district, not the Makai part, but in the Mauka part, in addition to all that, we have at least 2 senior residences, senior rental residences. We have rental properties aimed at a lower income level. We have 2 rental projects, rental housing projects that we've done. Nohona Hale on Cook Street. I know that I'm just saying out these street names and you might not be familiar with it. And we have the Art Space Lofts, which is a place where it gives a preference for artists so that they can come in and rent space. I did an interview with one of the residents, and that Art Space Lofts was transformative for her and her family. It allowed her to get out of a homeless shelter and rent space in Art Space Lofts. And I know Ryan mentioned that in 1976, Kaka'ako was a very industrial sort of very industrial area, a lot of warehouses, what the legislature thought was dilapidated, underutilized. So a lot of mom and pop repair shops, body shops, so forth. We've kept those uses in Kaka'ako because those industrial uses are really part of the DNA of Kaka'ako. So we've not only kept those uses, but we've also incentivized those uses. So if people want to put industrial use on the bottom of their condominium tower, like a car dealership or a repair shop, they can do that, and they would get incentives for it. So we're more than just that. We have a lot of parks that landowners have built, and we've required as part of their development, open space, better streets, more walkable streets, more accessible streets. And then, at least for right now, we have the terminus of the rail station. So there are plans to develop more housing around this transit station. So my point is, we're not just the high-rise you see, and we're not just the posh village that some journalists, civil beat, want to say they are. We have much more than that. We have parks, we have Jabsum, we have all that.
Mahalo for that, Craig. I appreciate it. And if anyone would like this presentation sent to them, you can just go ahead and put your email in the Q&A. And for those of you here, I can grab it from you. And we can send it along. They are two separate ones because we combined it before this, but just please.
So I just have a comment. I used to work in Kaka'ako in the early 70s, and I loved it as it was back then. And then my second comment is the voting, who gets to vote for this 9-person board. Oh, by the way, it does say eminent domain is possible for land taking, as Ali said. So let's just put that one to rest. But for a 9-person board that is voted on by whom, it kind of reminded me of when OHA was taken to court and had to open up voting to non-Hawaiians for that board. So I'm just wondering, like the families that live in Vegas now, who have family still in Lahaina, or people buried in the graveyard where I work, Waiола Church, which is one of the icons of Lahaina. So it just kind of feels like it's going to be an illegal mechanism, and I don't think you guys have really presented how that's all going to work. You don't really know yet. Is that correct?
Well, let me answer your first comment first. You should come to Kaka'ako.
I have been.
Okay, good. So some of the parts of Kaka'ako that you remember from the 70s are still there on what in the area we call Central Kaka'ako, Queen Street, Kauai. They're still there, and it's likely that they still will be there in the near future. As to the second part of your question, I think this 9-member elected board, again, is it perfect? Maybe not. Again, I understand that there's opposition to an elected board. Honestly, there was also opposition to an appointed board. And if we didn't have an appointed board or an elected board, you would have no sort of greater governance of this. I think the elected board, again, I mentioned the residency requirement. The county clerk is going to have to administer that. If you're a resident, even if you live right now temporarily outside of the district, I think you can still vote because your residence, your permanent residence is the district. Now, as far as the elected board, I think this is one of those instances where it is an opportunity for democracy at work. You actually have people from this district who, are like you. They want to see, good things happen in the district, and they want to serve. And if you don't like what they're doing, you can vote them out in the next election cycle. You can also run yourself, and it's a 2-year term. right? So you can also run for office yourself if you're that dissatisfied. Also, you might know some of these people. So if you're dissatisfied them, you can, get in touch with them and say, I don't like what you're doing. This is not elected people who occupy an office at the Capitol or someplace else. They're your neighbors. They're some of your friends, some people you know. And the way the bill has been revised in the latest draft is to address some concerns that there's going to be a lot of money being donated to candidates, right? To facilitate more grassroots participation in the election process. Every candidate, the candidate's limited to $100 per donor per election period. So what that means is from, let's say from November of 2024, right? From November of 2024, when the general election is had, till the next November of 2026, in that 2-year cycle, 2-year period, someone can only donate $100 to you if you're a candidate. That's not a lot of money. You can't even do a mailer, a decent mailer. But the reason why it was done that way is to make this a true grassroots kind of election.
Can I ask a question specifically about that?
So I did get a question of just what your name was.
Say that again?
Someone was just asking who you were that asked the question.
I'm Judy Kinzer. I'm a trustee for Wyola Church.
Judy was the trustee for Wyola Church, was who asked the question.
So regarding the board, Tara Paleka, I apologize. So for the board, let's pretend it all happens. We got these 9 community members. If whatever the policies, procedures, guidelines, whatever like the laws for what their ability to do within this board, if they find that there's something that they would like to change or adjust, are they at the mercy of oh my God, I'm going to say it wrong, HCDA, or can they go ahead and amend, like as you would amend a bylaws or something? How does that work?
So, Tara, I don't know if I put it quite like that, at the mercy of HCDA staff. What I think I'd like, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure, because words mean a lot. What it is the board, the 9-member board, they need support, right? The 9-member, it's kind of like a neighborhood board. The neighborhood board has a neighborhood board staff office that helps support. So we are that supporting staff that provides planning expertise, infrastructure development expertise, and all those things to support the board. If a community plan is adopted on January 2025, for example, right? After community engagement, and the plan and the rules want to be changed, because the plan and rules are not a static document. They are not a static document. We just updated our Maukere rules for Kakako, so they are not a static document. They can change, but the board would have to vote to make those changes, probably after recommendations and discussion with staff. Correct, the 9-member board. So it's good to note that the plan and rules are not intended to be a static document. They are meant to change over time. Maybe if the needs of the community change over time, people want more of something else, then the rules would change. If for example, in certain of our districts, long time when the rules were first adopted, we had projected a population of X, and we had plan and rules that took into account that kind of growth. But if the growth is different, then I think we have to adjust the plan and the rules to allow for that. So it's not a static document, and they're not at the mercy of us. We're actually working for them, the board, and facilitating and helping them. I would work for the board, right? No. It's all right. I just want to make sure that people don't think, they're at the mercy of us or something.
Dickie Moon here. One of the confusing issues to me is is I think there's some very positive things about this legislation and what could go. But I don't hear any interaction with the mayor's advisory board that was set up and any connection between the two, or if there's been any discussion. And that leaves me in the lurch of where this has some really good things, but there's a whole community board that was set up, and it hasn't been mentioned today.
So I guess a distinction is that the mayor's advisory board were appointed by himself, right? So he appointed those community members to specifically advise him on Lahaina and sort of the things that are going on in Lahaina. And per Jackie, because she's usually the one to do these invitations along with our other team member, Yayoi, we've invited everybody who we think would have who has seats at specific tables, whether they be at the county level, the mayor advisory board, the state legislatures, and then at the same time, the state agency who's prescribed within this bill, which is HCDA. So the invitations have been there, and I think that sort of stems back to us doing our best to try to engage them. So I think if you're a Lahaina resident and you know them personally, ask them. I think you have every right to ask them what they think about the bill, or if they had a chance to read it, and what ways are they engaging within the discussion, because I think it's a fair question to ask, because I mean, granted, they're volunteer board members, they're not getting compensated for their time, but they did accept a position of influence within the parameters of that board. So I think that's a great question that possibly they'd be willing to entertain, and I'd be curious to know what their positions are as well.
Okay, and then the second part of it is, 9 members must be a registered voter in the district, and that goes with the voting part of it, is that means that a tenant in a home that is living there registered to vote, they have more rights than the landowner who may not live in Lahaina. So we have some real there's some real things. That's just the tenant side of it. Then you get into the business side of it, and you just go, lots of the landowners do not live in Lahaina, the business owners, and then there's business leases and so on, where you have no voting right under these things, but you have, our business employs 300 people in Lahaina. And so you go, well, how do I get to vote? I live out in Apili, so I'm out of the district. I can't vote. I'm gonna tell you, Peter Martin does not live in Lahaina, and he's probably one of the largest landowners of that whole district, and he lives on the other side of the island. He can't vote.
It's a dangerous can of worms.
So that's a can of worms. I'm friends with Peter, but the point I'm making is there's a lot of things that need in this structure that need to be sorted out before it can get voted on.
And I just want to speak to that. And I think for me as a community member, in every time I've submitted testimony, I've asked them to address that. And I think because if you're from West Maui, if you're from Lahaina, you understand that the community of Lahaina isn't just what's in the burn zone. It consists of everything that's in West Maui. And I think that's something that I'm going to say, not to sort of strategize, but if you feel strongly about that, then that's a commentary that should be made to the legislature, that this is not, if you're going to entertain this bill, that this is not a compromisable issue or compromisable point.
And I'll get to you, Keahi, sorry. Dickie, I just let me just comment a little bit. I get what you're saying. You can be a major landowner in the district with a interest in how the district gets built and all that, but yet you won't be able to vote. So one is, it's not a lot different than if you had a business in Kakako, but you lived outside the district. You know, you have an interest in Kakako as a business owner, but you don't get to vote for the area representative because you live outside the district, right? That's just the voting rules. Second is, I suspect that your commentary is more a statement about whether or not you trust just the elected board, you know, as a whole. And that's a kind of a theme I hear from a lot of people. So I just want to make sure I just call it out as I see it, and that's, I think, what is really going on, because this voting landowner in a district not being able to vote because they don't reside, that happens everywhere where there's voting, right? In Kakako, you can own a business there, but you don't live in the district, you cannot vote. So I think it's a commentary on this elected board concept, and as of right now, that is the concept. If people don't like that concept, then I think they just need to oppose the bill and move on. Kiahi, sorry.
Yeah, the more we talk about this election, the more challenges and potential problems it seems to create. And you guys seem to have a lot of skills and assets and knowledge that could be really helpful to this whole thing. But it just seems like it would make more sense if you took all the things you're trying to do with this board and just go to the mayor and help support the county and the mayor, instead of creating this whole other thing that's on the side.
And Kiahi, I think, as I've said to everybody else, there's really two ways of, you know, having a government agency involved in Lahaina in the rebuilding. There's the county. Well, FEMA is involved, but FEMA is not going to be here forever. And then there's the so-called state, right? There's a so-called state. If you don't feel that the state is the right entity, you don't feel that the state is the right entity, and you feel county is the right entity, then I think that is your choice, and that's your voice, and you should make that known. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I'm not disagreeing with you.
It just seems like that's the way I envision government works. The state supports the counties to help, you know, like it trickles down. The Fed supports the state.
Well, I think,
state supports the county.
so I think what you're describing essentially is this kind of home rule kind of concept, right? This home rule concept. Now, just to be fair, right? Just to be fair, there's state, right? Which is, so there's feds, state, county, right? In some jurisdictions on the mainland, there's something sort of more granular than a county. There's townships, municipalities, so forth. What? Yeah, even Oahu, right? So there's that. And so what this bill tries to do is really take home rule, what you're suggesting with the county, and take it one step sort of closer to the people who live in the district by having this 9-member elected board that is just made up of people who live in the district. So it's going state, disagree with state, county, and then now taking it to this sort of.
There is no township.
I'm not saying that. I didn't say there was a township.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying
I
it
meant
creates like a model.
neighborhood boards is what I meant by that. That's what they have on Oahu is neighborhood boards.
I'm saying that this tries to create this township kind of concept that's even a little more granular, and then so Kiahi's talking about home rule county. I get that, but now this is taking it another step and trying to make it more home rule by saying you've got this group.
Yeah, which is fair, but it seems like it should be under the county.
And you know what, Kiahi, I'm not here to debate this. Remember, I said I came here to provide information, answer questions. I'm not here to advocate one way or the other. This is, I think, if I'm going to be true to the sort of come here to tell you, I mean, to answer questions and to let you be the choice, deciding factor. That's it.
Okay, so I'm going to hand this off. I just wanted to address, someone said the discussion will not change the language of the bill as it is now, regardless of this discussion. But I just want to highlight, again, that's what testimony is for, right? Like, that's why, like, we love this, put it in writing to the state, you know, like to our legislatures, right? And like right now, it's not even up for a hearing, so that's, you know, moot. But just that's more why we were holding these, was to let people know, like, it's not set in stone. We're like, we as a community, we have had impact. There, like, SD2 is very different than the original, and that's what we're trying to encourage, is just everyone, like, get your mana'o out there, you know?
Tara Paleka again. I appreciate you guys being here, because I'm sure you're just, guess what you're doing? You're doing your job. It's not like you signed up and put yourselves out there and you needed more tasks. But real quick question, it might be stupid. The $100 million that the appropriation, is there a timeline on that to be use it or lose it, and what is that?
The $100 million from the state of Hawaii requires a $100 million match in private equity. Though the general fund side will lapse July 30, 2025.
So who supplies that match? Is it $100 donations, or are you going to take?
No, this is a different topic. It's not on the election. It's on the funding for the district. It's private match. It's it hasn't been identified.
So yeah, so I believe the way the bill is written is 100 million if it's matched by private donations of 100 million, but there's no limits on that like there is with the elections.
And I think that sort of makes my point, is that when I say that the rebuilding of Lahaina is going to take people in who live in the district, businesses in the district, businesses outside the district, philanthropy, is going to take a lot of people, and the $100 match could be donated by one donor, could be, or several, or could be $5 donations from a lot of people. It could be all that. But again, it reinforces my point that this cannot be done just the way the bill is written. It's got to involve the county. It's got to involve feds. Probably it's going to involve federal, grants and maybe even loans, and it's going to involve philanthropy donating.
We need more discussion. We can't just decide, on this thing. It's obviously there's just this little group of people here. We have a ton of questions. I just want a couple more things that I just want to make a comment. Oh, sorry, Theo Morrison. So it said in the bill, which I read this morning, it said that this organization would, the Lele thing, would be the master coordinator of all federal, state, and county agencies for the recovery. That's crazy. I work with FEMA like every week, and then I'd have to have another agency on top of that. To me, that's crazy. And then it talks about this Lele group would prepare a community plan. We spent years as a community going to meetings and we prepare, and there was a community plan. So is that out the window? It's the county plan. Whether it's implemented or not, I don't know, but it's built, it's written. And then this other thing, which has not come up at all, is that we're going to get taxed. We're going to get assessed. Everybody in the district, and that includes churches and that includes nonprofits. The only one that's not assessed is the federal government. It doesn't say what it is. No, wait, I just want to finish. And then, yeah, the other thing, that 100 million, I'm really concerned about that match from the community. That, I mean, somebody could easily own it by donating 100 million. I mean, obviously. So, my comments.
Can I just work backwards from your list? So the 100 million, general funds, private equity would go into a special fund held under the HCDA. The expenditure of those funds is dictated by the board, not by the donor who gave those funds. It's by the board. And we're just following that direction. Going up, the assessments. So assessments aren't automatic. It has to be formed with a methodology. uses of that assessment have to be explained, so it's not just a tax on all landowners. We actually use this in Kalailoa, so we could share that information after this also.
And again, I think the assessments, yeah, it's in the bill, right? It's a percentage of the land, you know, based on acreage, yeah, the share of the land in the district. But as Garrett was saying, you know, we do have these assessments in Kalailoa, and that's to cover, again, operational funds.
If you were just hired as consultants with the county, then we wouldn't be taxed like this. Anyway, that's just.
Paul Deloria. Again, I just want to emphasize, I think, the comment that was made that if this is to help facilitate quick recovery, then why not empower and utilize the consultancy that all of you have as well as the state and use that for the county itself and already what's in line right now and what's happening. And not only use that, but what you're doing is you're creating another framework, another entity that then is controlled essentially by the state, not by the county, but by the state. So again, when I look at home rule, yes. When I look at empowering the county and the residents here, yes. This does, to me, the opposite of that.
Paul, thanks for the question. So implicit, I think, in your question is one huge assumption in that it assumes that the county would want our help in the consultancy. And I don't know if they would want to help. I don't speak for the mayor. I don't speak for the planning department. But they may not want our help. And if they don't want our help, we wouldn't be able to help. Okay, so that's a big assumption in what you asked for. And again, I'm going to say this again. If it's not the state, if it's not HCDA, it could be another state agency if you think there's another state agency can do it. Or if you feel the county is the best entity and they're going to do it the fastest, quickest, most efficient. Okay, well, if you think the county is the best government agency to do it, then I think that is your choice and your thoughts about it, and that's the feedback. And then I think you act accordingly. As far as Theo, I think your question about the planning, let me kind of go back to that a little bit. I'll get Ryan to comment. So there have been, plans done in the past, I think, and all of those kind of planning efforts would not be disregarded. In fact, I think we would be obliged to take into account and try to align with those county plans. The other thing that has changed, since those county plans have done, and maybe the West Maui Community Plan is, the fire has occurred. So, I think that's a big change. And then that's something, I think I was mentioning that plans, and especially community plans, master plans, are not static. They change and they're meant to be flexible, and then they're meant to accommodate changing conditions. So I would disagree a little bit with you. I think while there have been planning efforts, and there probably will be planning efforts in the future, that the fire has really changed, is a changing circumstance that maybe needs to be addressed somehow, but we will take into account past plans and efforts.
Yeah, just to add, the Maui Metropolitan Planning Organization, they just completed, their West Maui Transit-Oriented Development Corridor Plan, which I guess was in progress and due to be finished, and then the fire happens, so I guess they pivoted, and they modified that plan and put in some ideas. They got their consultant to help, put in some ideas in terms of how to direct the growth of reconstruction of Lahaina. But again, that that's just a start, right? That effort needs to be expanded. And, there's a lot of opportunities to really make a more sustainable, community through that.
Jerry Isdale again. I wanted to address a couple of things. One, the voting. You guys mentioned that was changed between draft 1 and draft 2 because there are constitutional limits on how the voting happens. You have to be a registered voter. If you want to change that, go change the Constitution. Good luck. Similar, the board's charter or whatever it is given by the state. So if they needed to change things, they would have to be back to the state to talk about that. One of the things that I had heard about why this whole thing happened is because there is a undercurrent of opinion that the county can't produce. The county has a long history of dragging feet, whatever, taking a long time to get permits, 7 years to get the West Maui Community Plan to the draft stage. It's not an approved document yet. We don't have that time now to do that. And so whoever brought this up and brought it to the Senate floor apparently thought that maybe the state could push this faster than taking it out of county hands. Note that county planning has changed hands as administration a couple of times in the last couple of years. They're chronically overworked and understaffed. The whole community planning side of things is completely new to the county. They're trying to staff that up. They're hiring an external consulting agency to help. They just changed the rules on them and said that it has to be done, the plan has to be done by 1 year anniversary rather than the 2 years that they were giving them. We don't even have that much time to do community discussion. We need to start faster. It needs to happen. I've been talking with county about it. I want to talk to the rest of you, especially the business owners. Your voices are not being heard, and they need to be. There needs to be a discussion from you guys. It may have to be you guys that organize to help get your voices heard. And there is something happening in that area, but we can talk about that. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Yayoi, for organizing this.
Can I just clarify one thing? I think from the, as far as the board, I think from the first draft of the bill, where it was I think it was an appointed board transitioning to an elected board. And there were, there were concerns about even an appointed board, whether the governor was gonna appoint, certain people or not appoint certain people. And so there, like I mentioned earlier, there were objections to even an appointed board. So it went from appointed board transitioning into an elected board at some point, but after hearing some of the concerns about an appointed board not trusting the governor to appoint, then it went to a fully elected board in 2025, special election. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Mahalo, Craig. And I just want to mahalo for that mana'o, because we did get a lot of comments like that online as well, that it was specifically like, okay, but what has county done since 2018 about the fires? They haven't used the community plan that they made. And then I missed the rest. But so Kat is texting me on the side, and so she recognizes that there's still a lot of questions. And so I did ask, yes, let's extend for a half hour. So by no means does that mean that you folks all have to stay. But I just want to let you and everyone else online know that we will stop at 12:30 instead of 12 o'clock. So just in terms of fear about timing. So just wanted to throw that out there. I think I'm caught up, except Susan, your question, why not sooner? It's just in terms of how Akaku has to do their processing to get the materials be able to be replayed. They have it live on Akaku TV right now, but they're unable to like get it up, next day. She said it would be a couple of days, and I think the deadline for when this would have to be scheduled for its next hearing would be on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Tuesday, I'm sorry.
All right, so I actually wanted to entertain some questions specifically because they've been in the press a lot, and specifically regarding HCDA and and Kaka'ako. But one of the things that was written in the Civil Beat article was the sort of failure of HCDA to provide affordable housing within Kaka'ako as originally planned. So my question is, in what ways can we secure that the long-term community plan of Lahaina will be focused on affordable housing rather than luxury homes or luxury high-rises? There's a slide.
No, I think they're talking more about Kaka'ako. Right, you talk about
No,
Kaka'ako.
well, I want to focus it on Lahaina. In what
Okay.
ways can we secure that that any sort of new housing developments or projects that are proposed within the district would be directed towards affordable housing versus luxury homes or short-term rentals or things that don't necessarily cater to the existing residents of Lahaina?
Yeah, so one thing in the bill, the current Senate Draft 2, it's very clear in terms of the guidance and the direction it's spelled out for the board to take. So, the bill is very clear. It says, the board's actions shall result in a community that reflects the values, aspirations, and goals of residents, includes a significant number of affordable homes, right? So that's clearly in the guidance for the board. It also, there are 13 different guidance policies in there. It talks about prioritizing the replacement of 3,000 housing units. So it's pretty clear that, in terms of where the board would, take the input and direct the staff in terms of the direction. I think Craig, mentioned a lot of the different types of housing that HCDA's participated in over the decades in terms of building in Kaka'ako. Affordable homes, different types of homes, rental housing. Also, 20%. One of the big things in Kaka'ako and also in Kalailoa, which is our other district, is the reserve housing requirement. So we require developers to provide 20% of affordable housing units. Yeah, it's at 140 AMI. But a lot of those policies, it's all set by the board in terms of the different income limits or what to provide. But yeah, so the board can set the policies, and these are all of these units, they are being provided by the private sector.
So to sort of clarify, any sort of directives within the district would be prescribed specifically by the board and not necessarily through HCDA.
Correct.
So can I ask a follow-up question then? In what ways would HCDA have specific influence over decision-making by the board? Are you acting in the role of a consultant or advisor? Obviously, the way that it's written, it doesn't give HCDA the authority to make that decision, but how do you foresee HCDA would conduct yourselves within that sort of structure?
Thanks, Eric. Let me just kind of go back to what Ryan said. Let me add one more thing. In the Kaka'ako district, and I think in Kalailoa as well, but I know in Kaka'ako, we do not allow transient vacation rentals. We do not allow transient vacation rentals. As far as Eric's second question, I think I mentioned that the way I view HCDA's involvement in this, the board is separate. The Lele District Board will be separate and distinct from the other HCDA boards like Kaka'ako, Heia, Kalailua, so forth. It would be separate. It would be run independently. There would be very little connection to those other boards. However, a board, right, of 9 members who are elected need a staff. They need people to provide resources, people to provide guidance on land use, zoning, and other things. So that's what the staff would do, is provide that support for the board, much like, I think, on Oahu, a neighborhood board office, or providing support for the various neighborhood boards, and we'd provide that. But let me be clear again, because I don't want anybody to misunderstand this, right? We're in a staff capacity, we help the board, and we provide guidance. The board, the 9-member board, is going to be making the decisions. If you don't like what the 9-member board is doing, then the electorate should have some qualms with the 9-member board. They should. The 9-member board is going to, make those decisions. And if you don't like it, you can vote them out.
So one last comment, and then I'll be quiet. Judy Kinzer. So for the $100 million the state would provide, I think it would be way more productive to give that money to the county so they can hire more planners and staff instead of a 9-member board. And you folks, I think you guys are great. No problem with you all, but it just seems it'd be way more efficient to use that $100 million to fund the county to take care of its own kuleana. Thank you.
Judy, again, I'm going to be very clear about this. The decision to give money to HCDA, to another state agency, or even to give money to the county is the legislature's kuleana. That's their business to give it to. Now, one, I don't know if the legislature collectively would be willing to give $100 million to the city, the county, to hire planners for this effort. I don't know if they would be willing to do that. If they are, and that's an option, that's their call on that. I don't have any really skin in. I don't have any really skin in that game. All I'm here is if this bill becomes law, I'm going to do my best with my staff, and I'm going to carry this bill out to the best of my ability. If the legislature has a different direction for this, and they want to give, I think Mayor Bisson has come into the legislature to Senate Ways and Means, and has asked for $400 million to aid in the recovery. And if they decide to give that plus the $100 million that was under this bill and defer this bill, I think that's fine. That's another alternative to getting this done. I don't think there's any one way of rebuilding Lahaina, whether it's the state, HCDA, or the county. But I do know that, and I keep saying this because it's going to take the county to help. If it's a state, it's going to take businesses, people outside and within the district. It's going to take philanthropy. And, I sort of take a different view, Theo, to sort of the philanthropy donations. I think I like to think that if those philanthropy donations come in, they're not buying anything. I think they're contributing to, I hope, the good of rebuilding Lahaina, and that's what I bank on. And I don't view it as buying anything. In fact, I would welcome those donations because that's going to trigger the matching $100 million.
Are you a 501c3, so those donations tax deductible?
No, but we are not a 501c3 as an entity. We're not 501c3, but I think those donations to the state could be tax deductible. I have to figure it out, but I think those agencies or those philanthropy donations who want to make donations to help Lahaina, I'm not sure that a charitable donation is driving them to do it. They want to help the community.
I just wanted to actually point this out. The state budget is going to the legislature right now, so if you're curious to see any sort of inclusions within the state budget in regards to the county's request, I think they requested like 400 million to do some infrastructure work. You can follow the state budget. I assume that the money committees will probably place it within the budget versus through a legislative bill. So if you're following the legislation, or if you want to see where it goes, or what the state budget currently looks like, it's House Bill or HB 1800. So it passed out of the House and it's currently in the Senate, referred to the Ways and Means Committee, and they are hearing the state budget as well as the not so controversial judiciary's budget on Wednesday the 20th at 10 a.m. And you can watch that via YouTube.
And to clarify, when it comes down to testimony, the state isn't like the county. They do request that your testimony be in 24 hours early at least. They do accept it later as late testimony, but just as a rule, try to shoot for at least 24 hours early. And then I just want to remind folks, as I'm getting emails handed to me in the room, for anyone, I know there's some new people on, so if you would like us to have the slideshow that we have but didn't really get to sent to you, please go ahead and throw your email address in the chat so that I can have that sent to you. And then just a couple more of the things that have come up were, so what happens if we don't get the money? Supporters are saying we need this bill to earmark the funding, but could we end up with the Lele board and no money? Yeah, right?
I was going to say, actually, we can possibly upload the PowerPoint on our website also.
I would say if the bill passed without any funding, if it passed and it was, when I say passed, I mean signed by the governor into law. If that happened and there was no funding, that just wouldn't make sense.
No, I think if we don't get the 100 million match.
Oh, if we don't get the 100 million, well, I think we'll get up to 100 million match, right? Up to 100 million match, I think. Up to 100 million match. 100 million, two match. Yeah. Okay, so if we don't get the 100 million, we won't get, if we don't get the 100 million match, we don't get.
Okay, that's an important clarification.
And then I'd also to the point about testimony, Jackie, to everyone here, Judy, Theo, Paul, anyone else, even before getting to the testimony stage, because the testimony assumes that the bill is going to be heard, right? Mm-hmm. If we're, again, true to the purpose, which is to inform, not to persuade or to get you guys to go one way or the other. If you really want to kill this bill, just kill it. I would, Judy, Theo, Paul, and again, this is just information, right? You can write to the chair of the Water and Land Committee, and you can tell her that you prefer it not to be heard. That's your opinion. Chair Linda Ichiyama. She's the lead. Water and Land is the lead committee in the Water and Land / Judiciary Hawaiian Affairs. And conversely, if you support it and you want a hearing, I would suggest you write to Chair Ichiyama as well and ask her to hear the bill. That's democracy at work, right? And that's all we're saying. It's democracy at work.
Or if you want to be really thorough, you'd also send that same message to Speaker Sasaki as well.
Yeah, you can send it to Speaker. Speaker is Speaker of the House.
I don't think those mics are working. They are. I can hear them. When he gets it down here, it's the same.
Well,
not for you guys. It's for online. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a good point. I think if you really want to make a difference, write into Chair Ichiyama, ask her to schedule it or not schedule it, and then you can also ask Speaker Sasaki, tell Speaker Sasaki the same way. I think they want to hear from you. And so, Judy, Theo, Paul.
Oh, there's one more. I was like, So in terms of some of the other things I've seen online, I'm just seeing it scroll, so sometimes I miss things, but there is a comment about, so the county workforce housing ordinance will be ignored. The county has a higher percentage for affordable housing. Well, I think that from my understanding is that it's written that they're supposed to follow like local ordinances.
Yeah, I think one of the guidelines is to be compatible with county zoning.
And then
So-
there was a comment, county can't even fill their current vacancies. I think that catches me up.
Well, that's also a fair question for you folks. I mean, the commentary is that the county hasn't been able to staff personnel within these sort of capacities for community planning. How does HCDA intend to recruit and retain qualified personnel here on Maui to do the same type of work?
You want that one? Can we go back to the funding slide on there? So in the bill, there is 9 positions with a budgeted salary of $1.5 million for those positions. If the bill passes, we would look to hire individuals located on Maui. The $800,000 provides for operating expenses to set up an office. We still have to work out those details. That's in the future. But we are ready. The 9 positions I want to add are all exempt. We're not civil service. So the positions can be created pretty quickly. The responsibilities of the position can be modified based on the role that we need at the time.
Are they paid the staff as the board, or this is the staff to support the staff?
Staff. The board is unpaid. They're volunteers.
That actually was one of the comments that Lisa had that I had written down to share with, and I knew it would come up, was, she
Yeah.
finds that that's a concern, that the
Yeah.
board is unpaid.
Yeah, and so the members are unpaid. The board members are unpaid. Right now, maybe in the past, HCD has had a lot of staff vacancies and turnovers, but at least since I've been the executive director, and even my predecessor was the executive director, we've worked really hard to fill those positions. So right now, we are fully staffed. I think that's really a testament to the people in the agency and what we do. There are people who are really interested in what we do and the breadth of what we do. We're not just the community development districts anymore. We do more than that. If this bill gets signed into law by the governor, we know that there's going to be a few months gap between the time that the board is fully elected and constituted. So we had asked the committee to put some language in there that allows us, the staff, to work, to do some pre-work, that is to find an office here, to look to staff to hire, and try to do some of the initial groundwork to prepare for the community engagement. So the message being, there's certain things we definitely have to wait till the board is constituted, and the board is the ultimate power. But in the time it's going to take from the bill signing and approval to the time that the board is constituted, I didn't want to waste any time, and I wanted to be able to do some of that pre-work, come here, find an office, find locations, start talking to potential candidates. And really, I know that there's a lot of issues with hiring, and people, have trouble bringing on people. I get that. But I really think that out of all of this, there is, from a planning and community building standpoint, there is an incredible opportunity for planners, architects, engineers to really look at this community, take community input, what the community wants and see how we can make the community safer, because we can have, safer roads, better infrastructure, and then plan for things like Ryan, I think, mentioned, sea level rise, and how we're going to plan for that. Plan for safer ingress and egress out of communities, right? Ways to mitigate, fire and the spread of wildfires. Those are all things that I think if I was 30 years younger and a planner, I might be really interested in doing, because I think it's an opportunity to really build a community. And that's what we do at HCDA. We're not just about building condos. We're not just about building a high rise. And we're certainly not just about building what people so-called call luxury condominiums. We try to build a community. In Kaka'ako right now, we're building a dog park. There is no off-leash dog park in a certain part of Kaka'ako. So we're building that. The community wanted a safer crosswalk between the two parks that we own. So we're building that crosswalk right now with a beacon. We're looking at improving one of those streets in central Kaka'ako where all the car repair shops are, to make it like more complete streets, more walkable, more accessible, safer to people. These are not just condominiums we're talking about. We're talking about things in the community that are going to help them. We're looking at a way. We just found a place for a community organization called, formerly called Men's Shed, but Kupuna Shed, where men and women of all ages can come in a sort of a setting and kind of build projects, talk to one another, and build things. So we found them a temporary location, and now we're looking to find them a permanent location in one of our in the Kaka'ako district. That's not a condominium. That's not a high-rise. That's a community asset that we're trying to build. So.
Mahalo, Craig. Kalamai, my ADD brain got me. I got people texting me the messages, and my phone keeps shutting off because my battery's dying. So I did get a text from someone watching on TV, and they did tune in late, but they're wondering, why is the area up for redevelopment by the board extend all the way to Ma'alaya, knowing that the community made it known to development south of Lahaina is unsupported by water and infrastructure? So I think it's kind of a question of like, because, right, exactly. The question is like, since it's being included, like, is it going to be developed? Like, is that?
So, I think it's all going to be a lot of questions. These are good questions. I don't know if I really have an answer now. I think it's going to depend on what the board's vision for the community. I think all of those things, I mean, we're going to be looking at cultural resources, other kinds of resources, and trying to build upon that and then build a community with the board's vision. I just don't have an answer for that right now. I mean, if I have an answer for all of that, then I'm speaking for the board yet to be constituted. And I don't want to really back the board, the to-be-formed board, into a corner. I want to let them decide what their vision is for the community after there's community engagement and planning.
I think the sort of unfortunate thing about legislation is nothing is sort of set in stone, right? Everything is, the possibilities are endless unless it's actually implemented. But in regards with that and sort of my understanding of the bill, the board would have powers to set specific zoning. So if they're going to say like this is all preservation land, nothing can be built here, not even sort of basic infrastructure, that would be something that would have to be honored based on the sort of statute authority that's given to this board, right? So if they say everything in the poly, the mountainside of the poly that within the district is preservation land, and you can't even bring your horses or whatever, or if they say that it would ultimately be whatever the will of the board would be, and that's sort of that's a possibility. And of course, the other side to that is there might be board members who would want it developed, then it would be another unfortunate. Well, that's a question that I have for you, for HCDA. In regards to a long-term community plan, because we have community members who have gone through a community planning process, what is the timeline in your expectation for us to actually, go through the process of community planning to the point of, actually starting sort of those projects?
I'll also, I'm gonna speak to it and then also, ask Ryan to chime in. But I'm not a planner. I am not a planner. Ryan is a planner. But what I've come to learn about planning is that it starts from the community and it starts from asking them what they want. The most toughest lift really and challenge of planning and long-range planning for a community is getting that community input. And what I've learned in the last couple of meetings that we've had is that there's so many different voices in the community, and they're good voices. They have a lot of different opinions. Not everyone is aligned, and that's not a bad thing. But what that suggests is that community planning, and you asked me for a timeline. I don't know if I can give you a timeline, because if I gave you a timeline, I think I'd be just giving you a swag date, and I might not be able to make it, and you're going to say, well, Craig, you told me 2 years, or you told me 5 years, and you didn't make it. I think I'd rather understand what's involved in the community planning, what is the extent of community engagement that the community expects out of me. And if that expectation is they want me to go from neighborhood to neighborhood, from door to door, for example, or from community to community and ask people, or to take online surveys, or to do other kinds of community engagements, that's necessarily going to take longer than just putting out a survey and say, what do you want? So as far as the timeline, I hate to give deadlines just because I don't want to give false expectations to it and then I miss that deadline, because right now I only know what I know, and I don't know a lot. I mean, all I know is we have to listen. We have to take into account the county plans and planning. We have to take into account the studies that were done, respect the cultural resources of and the history of the community, and we have to build upon that to create a vision that the board wants. It's as simple as that. And I'm sorry, but I can't reduce it to we're going to start in January and we're going to finish in December. I'm just not prepared to state that. And anything I say right now is probably just going to be a plug date. I'm being very honest with you. I can't.
That's good. We appreciate that, because that is, you can't set a timeline on it, but this goes back to my whole issue. I'm sorry. This goes back to my whole issue. This community needs a year to talk about this process. We need a year, because it's just, we can't just throw this all together and then start talking to the board. We need to, there's so many questions.
Theo, if, again, if you feel that the community needs a year, 2 years, 3 years to talk about this concept, then that's what if you feel that's what it needs, then state your concerns to the legislature. But in 2 or 3 years, okay, well, again, you in sitting in that position right now, in that chair, you can't say that in 1 year you're going to have the whole entire community aligned on one bill. You still could have 10 different voices, right? So, right. Well,
I think it was Jerry, right? So I think to Jerry's point, this bill was it was really born out of, and we were hoping that a couple of them could be here today, but they had to work and everything. But there was a conversation with the Ways and Means Committee. They came to Lahaina, they met with Lahaina Kupuna, and this bill was birthed out of that conversation of like, what did they want to see? And when I say, to Jerry's point, I mean in terms of they have experienced for a long time the slow move, right? And so I think that's why there was this birth of a state workaround for how can we overcome the sluggish nature of county bureaucracy. And I think that's just, and so I think it's important to just know where that came from. And then there was a question, I did walk away because my phone is distracting me because I can't turn the sound off all the way. But there was a question, so theoretically, the board could rezone ag to rural. And I think the answer is yes, but again, this comes to, we're speaking on something that, a board that doesn't exist, and we're already showing that we don't trust this board, right? So I think that's just.
And I will say something else too. I mean, I think if I don't know the history of the county and how whether they've been fast or slow, I don't know all that. And maybe it's better that I don't, because I come in with sort of a clean slate in that regard. And I had a chance to speak with the mayor. I was grateful to have the chance to speak with the mayor, the managing director, and the deputy managing director about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was on a call. The mayor spent a lot of time with me, and the managing director spent a lot of time with me. They asked me a lot of questions, a lot of tough questions. I answered the way I'm answering now, honestly. And I told the mayor that I think, unfortunately, the county is not included in this bill. And some of that was by design, because this, as Jackie mentioned, this was kind of birthed out of the community, and that's what the community wanted, good or bad. But I did pledge that if this bill became law, I would do my best to work with the county, because I think we do have to work with the county. But I would also say that if the will of the people, or some of them, is to defer this and just let the county do what they're continue to do what they're doing, then that's fine too. The second point I would make, though, is the legislature. I'm going to presume, and I don't know how this bill will kind of fare in the Finance Committee. Ways and Means, or the whole legislature. But when money is available, right, like $100 million, they're going to pledge this, right, as a matching. It's available for the time that this, until the money lapses, as Garrett mentioned. After that, or even before that, if this bill doesn't pass, the money may not be available. That's just the reality of the legislative budget cycle, that money's available one session, may not be available the next session. And, believe me, I'm not saying that as a threat. I'm not saying that as an ultimatum. I'm not saying that to pressure anyone to support the bill. That is the legislative budgeting cycle. Money available in one budget biennium, right, or budget cycle year, 2 years, may not be available in the next one. We face the same challenges as a state agency. If we don't get money appropriated in one legislative session, we may not get it for the next couple of legislative sessions. It's just the way the budgeting cycle is, and it depends a lot on the revenues that come into the state, the Council of Revenues, budget forecast. The legislature is also facing this session, right, as is some of the counties, I think, is that they're faced with $120 million possible payout to state workers for hazard pay during the COVID years. That is not a budgeted expense, so they could be facing that kind of, hit on the budget, an unbudgeted, unexpected hit. So those all factor into it. So that's my second point, Theo and Judy, that monies that are available under this bill, and if the community says they want to take another year, 2 years, 3 years, could take longer to kind of work this out in the community, monies available now may not be available next time. And again, that is not an ultimatum, that is not a threat, it's just stating fact.
Yeah, my understanding from the Ways and Means Committee was that our soonest next opportunity would be 2026. So just to like have that in our minds, that's what we were told from them, and that makes sense the way that you explained it, because that now I get why 2026 was, right? Because we're about to have an election, so next time they do a budget, right? We do have 5 minutes left. Does anyone?
Can you give us like a timeline? So basically you're saying.
Can you hold on?
Yeah, I'd like to see a timeline of when we need to respond to this legislature people and what we need to do, who they are, and so we as a community, at least some of us, can respond. I mean, I don't normally deal with the legislature. I normally deal with the county council. So I don't have a lot of experience with the legislature.
So the bill is currently referred to the House Water, Land, and Judiciary and Hawaii. Sure, yeah, we can certainly provide this in writing to you as well. But I just want to verbally state it so those who are watching. So the bill has not been scheduled for hearing. There's a Tuesday deadline in order for this bill to stay alive or to have this discussion within a formal setting. It needs to be heard by these committees. So if it's not heard by, if the hearing notice isn't posted by Tuesday, it's a likely dead bill. So if you are looking to provide comments, whatever your position is, you can submit them to the House Water, Land, and or the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee. So the House Water, Land Committee is chaired by Representative Linda Ichiyama, and the House Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee is chaired by Representative David Tarnas.
And I did make, I personally, I find it very tedious when I'm trying to monitor, you know, which committee is this, who's the chair, going back and forth. You got 10 tabs open. So I did make a sheet. So again, if your email is in the chat or I have your email here, I will include that in what I send. It's a Senate committee's Word document, and it is a House committee's Word document, and they have the contact, the chairs, the phone, and emails for each of them. So I just needed a cheat.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Theo, I mean, I would, if timing-wise, I would do that right away, because as Jackie mentioned, there's a Tuesday deadline. So if you want to have an impact on whether or not the bill gets heard or not, you need to send an email right away and tell them how you feel.
So the timeline for this bill is, if it does get a hearing, the House has a 48-hour notice, right?
Yeah.
So they have to notice committee hearings for this specific bill by Tuesday. If it doesn't get posted, it's killed. If it does get posted and it gets set to a hearing, then there's the opportunity to provide public testimony. And you can do that through the capital.hawaii.gov website. If you follow Lahaina Strong, they have provided sort of tutorials on how to go through that process. Unfortunately, I think that's the only way you can submit written testimony. You can also try to email it to the representative's office and then call their office and confirm.
Yeah.
Or yeah, you can zoom in and provide verbal testimony. So I'm just going to go through so if it passes this committee, then it has to be referred to the Finance Committee, and the chair of that committee is Representative Kyle Yamashita, who is a Maui representative. He represents Upcountry Maui. And then if it passes that, then it goes to the final floor on the House for a vote. Then the bill gets sent over to the Senate, and then it would go to what they call conference, which is this this final negotiation table between representatives within the Senate and representatives within the House to come to a final negotiation. But just to be where we are now is the bill needs a hearing, and whatever your position is, like Craig said, communicate it with those representatives.
And I wanted to say a closing.
Okay.
For maybe a half a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I just wanted to say, I wanted to thank everyone who invited us here. And I wanted to thank everybody who's on Zoom and everybody here in the studio. And also I want to thank Garrett and Ryan for being here. My staff, we have 23 staff members, right? And we're all public servants, and in this particular bill, we're public servants wanting to help the public. We don't have any agenda or other intentions other than just helping and answering the call to help. And if that call, if that call is done because the bill gets signed into law, we're ready to go. And we have no other motives, intentions, or agendas besides doing what the bill asks us to do, that is to plan for the rebuilding of Lahaina. And I have no political agenda to fulfill. But I wanted to just thank my staff because they're behind this too, 100%, and we're ready to go if that happens. Thank you.
Yes, and so I think we're probably about to be cut off, but in case we haven't been cut off, I just wanted to say I did have a conversation with someone, and I know people are fearful of the way that things go to conference and then it can go back to the original bill. But the mana'o that I've gotten is that with how many edits have been made to this, they would just kill it. They don't think it would go back to an old version. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought that was an important thing to hear. So it hopefully got on there. But, but thank you all so much for coming.
Well, thank you for everyone who joined us on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Mr. Nakamoto and the staff of HCDA and all of you here who physically came down from West Maui. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.